Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction Recovery with God. In this book, I talk about how to walk out of debilitating and life-controlling issues by having a relationship with God. That's what we all need. I also have 20 incredible testimonies of real people who have overcome with God's help, so I'd love it if you check it out. But every week I interview somebody who has overcome a life controlling issue. And this week, my guest is Craig. Craig, welcome to Voices of Recovery.
Thank you.
Good to have you. And I should say welcome back. Some of our audience may recall that you were recently on with your fiance, Amy. And Amy has been a guest a couple of times, and then you joined her. But you gave a little bit of your testimony there, and I really wanted to hear more. So you were gracious and willing to come back and just have an interview with yourself. So I'm so excited for our audience to get to hear more of your journey with God. But before we get to that, could you just introduce yourself to our audience, please?
I am Craig. I am in long-term recovery, coming up on 4 years sober.
Wow.
And I have got a friend at work that says that my life kind of reminds him of the movie Forrest Gump.
Oh, really? Okay. How is that?
Just because a whole lot of random things I've been through that he ended up knowing about some of them.
Okay.
And yeah.
Cool. I love that movie, and it's very inspiring. And, you know, as we go through all these different experiences, I've had a lot of different experiences too. And I call them God assignments, and he just uses everything in our lives. He wastes nothing. And we think that, why did I go through that? Why did that happen to me? And then later down the road, God uses it. So he's so amazing. All right. Well, you are engaged to Amy. Amy has a powerful recovery story of her own, and I love what God is doing in your lives. But let's talk about your story today, Craig. If you could just talk maybe a little bit about early childhood, just anything that would impact how your life kind of got off track. You admitted that you didn't believe in God for many years, but tell us about how things started for you.
Started for me, I mean, I guess you could say it was the basic Midwestern middle class household. Like, I played outside. We went over to my grandma's house for dinner and stuff. Like, my parents drank on the weekends and at parties we'd go to, because I played sports. I played youth football, baseball, basketball. Was more into football and baseball than basketball, but and my dad coached me in football and baseball. In football, we always had big parties at the end of the year or even middle of the year, and all the adults would drink a lot. But
Sure.
some of the kids, once we got a little older, started making our way in there. I did really well in school. I was in Cincinnati public schools. I was in Westwood Elementary, and I was top of my class, to a point where they gave me an entrance exam to a college prep school in Cincinnati public schools a year early, and I already passed it.
Wow.
But before the time came for me to actually take it and go, my parents moved us into what they said was a better school district in Oak Hills local schools. And I got there, and halfway through fifth grade, and they were doing stuff in fifth grade that I had already done in like third and fourth grade at Cincinnati public schools. So I got very bored very quickly.
Okay. Well, we know what happens when kids get bored, right? They can get into some trouble. And so you said that your story was like Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump, bless his heart, wasn't super smart, but you were, and you are. But you were talking about just the random events that happened in your life when you were saying that the person reminded you of Forrest Gump. But you're a smart kid. You've already learned this stuff. So what happened from there?
From there, I don't know. It was crazy, kind of almost like a culture shock, like going from Cincinnati public, like city schools, to like suburban schools.
Okay.
And like everyone there was trying to act like what the people in the city schools were trying desperately to get away from.
Hmm.
And there was people with more money, so money became a thing. Like, and that was, you were looked down on because you were poor. Which I mean, I wouldn't say we were dirt poor, but we didn't
Sure.
have a really nice house. We didn't have new cars. Like, I think my parents drove cars that were like 10 and 20 years old,
Yeah.
which now it doesn't sound as bad because cars that were built in 2000 are better than cars that were built in 1970. But
True.
I don't think we ever had any of that old. It was mostly 80s and 90s cars that my parents had when I was growing up. And it was, I don't know, I just kind of always knew I was different because, like,
Hmm.
my brain is strange. Like, I can see something and my brain just wraps all the way around it to the
Really?
point where it has made me a very, very productive worker when I have a job, very good at problem solving.
Hmm.
But it's also a curse because then my brain wraps around things when everyone else is just having fun and enjoying life, and my brain is wrapped around why we got to do it this way or why we got to do it that way.
Okay. Well, that's the way God made you. And that can be definitely an asset, but it can also be something difficult, right? So if your brain wraps around something that it's not supposed to, that can really take you down a difficult path. But then when your brain wraps around godly things, then that's awesome. So, it's like a person who's hard-headed, right? And I'm not saying you are, but I'm just using this as an example. A person who's hard-headed, and it's like they're going to go in a certain kind of direction and be very stubborn. When that person gets saved, they're going to be stubborn for God, and they're going to dig their heels in and have great faith. So our gifts are amazing. And again, God wired us in a certain kind of way. But when we don't know him, the enemy can use those gifts for harm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So at what point, Craig, do you kind of start maybe dabbling into some things that you shouldn't be? You said that your parents drank on the weekends. You had the adult parties and things like that, which is pretty normal. But at what point do you start kind of experimenting with these kinds of things and getting off track?
Well, it started really when I was 12. I tried something that just to feel like the burn of it going down, burn once it hit my stomach, and then I just felt like, ah. But and that it was still like I was still young and a little too nervous to try to steal anything from my parents or go
Mhm.
anywhere where it would be. But it was about when I was 14 because my friend's parents were separated, and his dad had a fully stocked liquor cabinet in their house, which was one of the bigger, nicer houses, and it was really fully stocked. And we used to go over there and drink. And I remember one time I drank like almost a whole bottle of vintage scotch. So that
Wow.
tells me it probably wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
And it wasn't meant to be drank the way I drank it. And like I woke up
Yeah.
the next day sick and everything, but my only thought was I can't wait to do that again.
Wow. That's a lot. And like you said, at the age of 13, 14, that's middle school years. That's when a lot of kids are starting to experiment with things. You kind of enter into a little bit of a rebellious time. When you're younger, you're more agreeable with your parents and doing what you're told, but then you hit those middle school years and the rebellion starts and the peer pressure and all of it just hits. So, okay, so you got super sick, but you wanted to do it again.
Yep.
And then what happened?
Then we started finding ways. Like I said, I played football through school, and football teams are notorious for knowing where parties are that have alcohol and underage drinking and stuff. So I
Mhm.
found that, but I was never one that just fit in with one clique. Like I got along with everybody,
I can
and
see that.
it just like I had my friends that weren't really part of the jock scene, and then I had friends that were, but
Mhm.
we just find wherever we could find to go to drink. And it was maybe more me than them. I don't know. I can't remember, but it it just kind of really took off. And then I got a couple years older in high school, and it became a lot easier because there was kids or guys that I knew that were in high school when I was in high school. Now they're older, that they got older friends that are old enough to buy stuff. And we had a friend that his uncle would buy us stuff all the time. And it really got out of hand really fast. And we'd have like one friend they had a camp in Indiana that we would go to when no one was there and drink. Another friend, his family had a camp that we went to out in Indiana, so we always had those to go to. And in the cold months, we always just went to my one friend's house that his parents were separated because the dad wasn't living there and the mom was never there because she was always out doing something.
Yeah. I can see that. I can totally see that. And yeah, I'm not going to go into that with the parents, but there are times when kids are not supervised and it just happens. So, okay. So, the partying happens, and I don't want to excuse it like, well, that's just what teenagers do, right? That's what kids do. That's what high school kids do. They go to parties and things like that, but that's not necessarily the case. Not everybody does that. And even if the majority of people are doing it, it doesn't make it right. Right? We as believers know that we're not to go with the crowd. We're not to do things just because everybody's doing them. But when you're a teenager, is that the way you're thinking? Probably not, right? Okay, so you're partying in high school. How do things get to the point where like it's a huge problem for you, Craig? It's an addiction.
Well, when I was when I graduated high school, I wasn't like going to school or anything. I had plans of taking a year off. I was working at a movie theater, and a guy that worked there was over 21. I was only like 18, 19. But we would drink, and sometimes we would drink there. And while we were working, we never got in any trouble for it. But there was just times where like I was at work and like I just felt so sick that I just had to go home. And then my parents got a divorce, and I always said they were drawing me in the middle of it. Like I know now that's absolutely not true. I was putting myself in the middle of it, and I was talking one way with one and then another way with the other. And then, I mean, I was of adult age, but still young and didn't know what I was doing. And I tried to pretty much run away from all of that and home. And I had met a girl on MySpace, and we started talking and dating. So I moved like 40 minutes away with her, and in her parents' house, where she did a lot more drugs than I had never done any at this point. I started smoking weed a little bit. I didn't like it, and I always felt like I was too smart for weed. And a lot of time when you're younger, you get busted for weed because everybody can smell it. And I thought I could cover up the smell of alcohol, I guess. I don't know. I was probably wrong. But we started just partying a lot. Like all we did was drink. I got a job that was higher paying, and we weren't paying rent or anything. Like it was warehouse job, decent pay, like full time. And we just had all this extra money that we were just drinking and doing drugs and going to concerts, drinking and on drugs, and going to a pagan camp that we used to go to where there was, believe it or not, drinking and drugs.
Yeah.
That pretty much was everything our life was about, was drinking and drugs.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a few things I want to talk about, Craig. One is people who are struggling with addiction, like the worst thing that can happen to them is to give them money. Like I have seen situations where somebody's doing really well, they get a check for whatever, or somebody gives them money, and it's a quick decline. Okay. So that's really important for people to remember. Like if you're trying to help somebody who's trying to break free from an addiction, do not give them money, period. Don't do it. If you want to give them food, or if you want to help them in another way, but giving them money, would you agree, is not a good idea? Because when there's when there's a big supply of money, it is just going to lead to poor decisions when they're in that space. And then you said that you hadn't done drugs before you met this girl. And let's face it, sometimes when we invite certain people into our lives, they are a negative influence on us. And it sounds like that's what happened with this girl. But you mentioned the Pagan festival, okay? And there was a lot of drugs and drinking there. So this is something that you mentioned when you and Amy did the interview together. Talk a little bit about that. What is a pagan festival? What are pagan beliefs? How did what were your thoughts at this point in time?
Pagan beliefs, I mean, why I got there was because I grew up Christian. We never went to non-denominational. My dad was Catholic. We never went to church except for weddings and funerals. Like we didn't even go Easter and Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But paganism, it kind of attracted me because it's polytheistic. There's more than one God.
Okay.
And nature is involved a lot in it. And it attracted me at a young age for some reason. And like I had kind of gotten into it, and then that girl that I met, she was always into it. So that just kind of propelled me even further into it.
Sure.
And the camp, it was a spiritual retreat for most. That's not necessarily what I used it for. I mean, I thought I tried, but there was just so much of everything. Like people that were old hippies from Woodstock era were there, and they were still doing what they did in Woodstock era.
Wow.
So there was a lot of spiritual stuff. It was for the summer solstice, which is like the most important holiday in the pagan year.
Okay. So when you say that people are spiritual, and this is something that a lot of people do not understand, they think it's like, oh, it's all good, it's spiritual, but there are dark spirits. And so when we understand that Jesus is the only way to the Father, that's what the Bible says, okay? And that's what we as Christians believe, because if we don't believe it, we're calling Jesus a liar, okay? He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But the world system is, oh, there are many paths. Oh, it's spiritual. It's good. But you kind of get sucked into this and then you see the darkness in it, right?
Yeah.
So at this time, were you like seeking God, or were you just kind of following along with this girl and going along with it because she was into it?
I was kind of following along. Like I've always had a questioning mind where I like to research things. Whether or not I ever believe them or experience them, I like to know what they're about. Like I have books on paganism, shamanism. I used to have Islam. I have all kinds of stuff just because it interests me.
Okay.
And like it was a lot of following her. I was seeking a relationship with God. And I don't know, like I was kind of turned off because of a lot of church going people that I knew were not, I mean, they thought theirs was the only way, but from what I've gotten to know now, it kind of seems like they were going against instead of with the Bible. And that, I guess, kind of deterred me to want to find an alternate.
Yeah. Let's be real. Okay. And we can be real, right, Craig? Sometimes Christians or people who profess to be Christians will turn off people and keep them away from church, keep them away from Jesus, right? I meet so many people who have been wounded in churches or wounded by Christians, or again, those professing to be. And we need to understand that Jesus would not do these things. Jesus loves us. He has a plan for us. God is good, right? So if you're watching today and you can relate to what Craig is saying, and it's like, yeah, I've been wounded by Christians, or I tried to go to a church and they rejected me, keep trying. And I put it to people this way: if you had a bad meal at a restaurant, would you quit eating? Would you quit going to restaurants? Probably not. You just find a good one. And there are good churches out there. There are amazing Christians out there. So if you're somebody who's been wounded and maybe you're seeking like Craig once was, I encourage you, Jesus will never hurt you or disappoint you. He is incredibly good and faithful, and he loves you. Amen. So Craig, can you kind of share with us how bad things got with the using and everything, and then how you came to faith in Jesus and how he helped you turn things around? That's a big question right there.
Well, um, there are a lot. It was real bad. Like I would drink, I would go out with friends, and like they would all be just mystified by how much I drank. And there was always the next morning of, do you remember doing this or saying this? And I I I wanted to say this too. I don't remember if I mentioned it the last time, but the Apostle Paul kind of really resonates with me because I mean, I may not have ever stoned Christians, but I may as well have, just
Wow.
because I was out for vengeance. And
Wow.
people would talk about this is in the Bible, this, or this, and I would just tear it down. And
Hmm.
that's something that God obviously forgave me for
Right.
and brought me back home. But
So
I
why do you think you were doing that? Why do you think you were doing that? Do you think it was demonic activity in your life because the demonic hates Jesus, right? Or did something happen? I mean, you were raised in a Christian home even though you didn't go to church that much. Why do you think you had it out for Christians like that?
just because, like I said, there was maybe a handful that I knew that said or did something. That there was a family that lived right down the street that they were Catholic or said they were or whatever. And it's just seeing the hypocrisy in a lot of this stuff. And I guess I was probably too, well, no, not I probably was. I was too young to understand that all have fallen short of the
Yeah,
glory of God,
right.
and all men will fail. All men will mess up. We do. It kind of, it says it in black and white.
That's right.
And it just, I wasn't able to comprehend that yet. And like, even though I knew I did, like, I guess I may have, I heard some from like the damning God stuff, like, oh, you're going to hell because you did
Yeah,
this or you did that or you
right.
said this. And I was like, well, if I'm going to hell, I may as well live it up then.
Yeah.
And
That makes
like,
sense, Craig. I'm glad you shared that and thank you. And I'm sorry that happened with that family, but you're right. People will fail us. Even amazing Christians that I know are, yeah, I don't want to put them on a pedestal, right? And I think that's a danger that we have even in the recovery community. It's like, oh, we put that person on a pedestal, that person's so awesome. And then that person fails, and then we're so devastated. We've The only one on the pedestal should be Jesus,
yeah.
right? But you know that now, you didn't at the time. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I feel like this happens to many people. I really do.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it does happen.
Definitely. Then, like, when I was 21, I got married to that girl that I ran away 40 minutes away from, or about an hour away from, to be with. And also, my best friend, the one that I used to party at his house, who his parents were separated and everything, he ended up getting leukemia and passing away from it at 21 years old.
Wow.
And both her and my drinking and drugs just got out of hand. It got to where I mean, our marriage was, we got married because she needed health insurance. Like, yeah, we thought we loved each other, but
Yeah.
like, we got a friend of ours ordained by some online craziness that
Yeah.
said he was allowed to say we were married. And we got divorced, and I moved, well, we separated. I moved back down, and my mom had cancer, so I was living with her. And I was there one night, like, I had gone out to the bar, and for some reason I didn't really drink. I got home and I sat up and talked to her for hours. She was crocheting an Afghan because she was really good at that. Because the bar she used to work for was doing a benefit for her where they were raffling that off
Mhm.
to help pay for medical expenses and stuff. And I remember her saying, "That's it, I'm finished." And like, we sat there and talked, and I fell asleep on the couch next to her, sleeping out and on the pull-out couch. And I woke up in the morning, she was seizing on the floor, like with foam coming out of her mouth and everything. Like, the cancer had metastasized and spread to her brain and everything. And I just kind of went into robot mode. I called 911. I called my aunt. I called everyone that I was supposed to call. And then my still wife that we were separated came and picked me up. So I wasn't driving because I'd gotten a DUI. Was that yet? I can't remember if that was yet. No, I just might not have had my license yet. But and then I moved back up there, but I was still coming down here to party. And no, that was after I got my DUI. I got a DUI and blew like a .09 or something, and it wasn't ridiculously high, but the fact that I blew anything, not
Yeah.
good. And like it was right after I had gotten a concussion too, so I shouldn't have been drinking at all.
Yeah.
Um, and then we still eventually ended up calling it off. I moved down here, moved in with my grandma, and something I didn't realize until I was like 6 months sober was that I was sleeping in the room where my mom passed away because they just put her on home hospice, and
Mm.
she went to her mom's house, my grandma's house, and I was sleeping there, staying there. Like I always told people I was doing it to help my grandma, but to be honest with you, I had nowhere else to go.
Mm.
I spent all my money on drugs and alcohol,
Yeah.
and I had burned a lot of bridges with friends I could have had along the way, and family also. Like I lived with my dad, and I'd sit there and drink in his basement all day long,
Mm-hmm.
and it kept getting worse, kept getting worse. I moved in with some friends. It kind of got better for a little bit. Like it wasn't as much of an everyday thing when I did it. When I did drink, I still went all the way with it. I
Mm-hmm.
ran into a girl that I used to work with at a movie theater, and we ended up starting to date. And like I had already had problems where I would start drinking too much. We ended up getting married, and like at our wedding, I ended up getting drunk and eating a handful of pills where I was like falling asleep at the reception part of it and everything. And I just I don't know. Like we had a really rocky relationship. I mean, if you get started off like that, it's gonna be rocky. But
Right.
it was a time when we were fighting. I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit to like 2016. This is when it gets really good. Like we had been fighting a lot on and off, and there was talks of separation, talks of divorce, talks of getting counseling, talks of reading books, and none of it ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to some I was drinking way too much. I was not drinking at the moment when this happened, but we were going to some festival or something, and I was driving down like a state highway. It's not a highway, but it's a big road.
Mm-hmm.
We were arguing with her daughter in the car, and she told me to drop her and her daughter off. She'd have someone else pick them up, and I did. And I started driving down the road, and then I said, F this, I'm just going home, getting my stuff, and moving out. And I tried to pull a U-turn on that road, and a car T-boned me going about 80 miles per hour. I
Wow.
remember the car hitting, my shoulder hitting, my head hitting, or no, my ankle breaking, my shoulder hitting, my head hitting, and then I don't remember anything for a while. I woke up, well, obviously was rushed into the hospital. The first responders thought I was DOA, but then when they were reaching into the car, they were able to find a pulse. So they
Mm.
cut me out. They didn't think I'd survive to the hospital. Then when I did, they didn't think I'd survive the night. Then when I did, they said I'd never walk again. They said I'd never be able to be on my own again or do anything on my own again. And like I was unconscious for I think like half an hour. Said
Mm.
I'm up breathing multiple times. I remember though in the hospital, uh, that's when I remember uh, I was and I woke up. I'm surrounded by machines and nurses, and I was really confused. I didn't remember. I was like, "What am I doing here?" Like, calm down. Do you know where you are? Yeah, I'm in the hospital. you know how you got here? Yeah, I drove. And she was like, no, well, no, you didn't. Like, wait, what? It was from that, like, I was in the hospital like a month, like, from they thought I was DOA to I only stayed in the hospital for a month.
Wow.
And I couldn't see God's hand in that yet. Like, I went home with Danielle, that was the second wife's name, and I was supposed to have 24-hour surveillance, but I was being such a nasty person that she just had to get away from me. And I remember the first time she left me alone, I walked to a store on a broken ankle to get a bottle of vodka.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was also after, because I had a traumatic brain injury with a bleed, with a subarachnoid bleed or hematoma. And it they told me if I ever drank again, it could kill me. But I still did.
Mm.
And
Wow.
when I was with her, once I was cleared to walk and everything, like, I started seeing the wreck happening again. I
Hmm.
started having really weird emotions, and I had friends that have been in school for like psychology and stuff, and also experienced a lot of traumatic stuff. And they told me that it sounded like I had PTSD, post traumatic
Hmm.
stress disorder. And I said, no, there's no way. I was never in the military.
Okay.
I, like a lot of people, thought that was only military that got
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Ended up ended up having to go to the psych ER like every other week. And my drinking just got worse because, like, I was afraid to be awake and I was afraid to be asleep. If I drank until I passed out, then I usually didn't have the dreams or I didn't remember
Yeah.
them. And so I ended up getting divorced from that. I first started trying to do AA because she told me I needed to. And I think I didn't drink for like almost 90 days. And like that's the longest I've done since I was like 12.
Hmm.
But we ended up getting divorced and I was living in hotels down by where I worked. And all of a sudden I didn't have anyone telling me not to drink anymore. So I started drinking again.
Hmm.
And then I got an apartment, and I really got bad then because there was no one here to check on me. I got keys to stop anyone from getting in,
Right.
locked and everything, so I can just do whatever I want. And it got so bad that I couldn't I couldn't leave my apartment unless I had something to drink. I couldn't eat anything unless I had something to drink. My nerves were so bad. Like, I was living to drink and I was drinking to die because I
Wow.
wanted to die. I didn't want to live.
Hmm.
And it just, I kept trying though. Like, I never gave up. Um, I was calling all kinds of numbers trying to get help because PTSD is something that not every therapist will treat, and that's all. It's really hard to find good treatment for PTSD.
Hmm.
But then I found out that because I called something called a mobile crisis unit or something, they come to you if you're feeling suicidal. And why I ended up calling them instead of just drinking myself to falling asleep, I don't know. I do know now, but I didn't know then.
Right.
Um, it just it was bad, and I
Wow.
got into a therapy program because they recommended one number. They gave me a bunch, but the one number they recommended, they said call this one first. I said, okay. I called them and they said I'd have to take a diagnostic test in order to be accepted. And my heart sunk. I was like, there's no way I'm going to pass the diagnostic test. They're going to say I'm not bad enough. I'm just going to be stuck in this road again. It was on the phone. I called, made the appointment, took the test, and the lady that administered it after I was done, she said, okay. And I was like, oh, great, here it comes. She was like, I don't know how to tell this to you, but yours is the worst score I've seen doing this. And I was like, oh. She was like, you definitely qualify for this program. And I was
Mm.
like, oh. So I set an appointment And the job I was working at, I ended up having them. Well, I was missing a lot of days just because
Mhm.
of like psychosis and alcoholism, both of them doing it. It's
Mhm.
absolutely. And I missed a day when they said that, and then they just had had enough of it. So they said, that's enough, you're fired. So my my heart hit my stomach again. Like, great, I'm going to lose my health insurance when I finally found somewhere.
Mhm.
Well, maybe I can get in for an appointment or two before my health insurance drops. At least maybe it'll stop me from wanting to die.
Right.
Um, so I go to my first appointment, and the doctor says, the first thing he says to me was that through clinical testing, now this is a University of Cincinnati Medical Center. So through clinical testing, they have some of the best clinical trials in the country. We now think that we can cure PTSD. I was
Okay.
like, what? What?
Mhm.
They're like, yeah. I was like, okay, okay. Still, and I hadn't told him anything that I was about to lose my health insurance or anything yet.
Mhm.
The next thing that comes out of his mouth, and if anything ever happens to your health insurance, uh, one of the players for the Cincinnati Reds gave a considerable grant to this hospital for
Wow.
this purpose to pay for it.
Oh my goodness.
Like my jaw hit the floor. I
Mhm.
was like, what? And he was like, that looks like that hit you. I was like, I just lost my job and I'm going to lose my insurance. And he like laughed like that. Wow.
Oh my. Wow.
Yeah.
So that had
Uh,
to give you some hope, Craig, that things were going to get better for you. And I want to
definitely.
leave time to talk about what you're doing now. So can you, that is an amazing story. And I didn't know about the car accident. I did not know how the PTSD came in there, but I know that that's something that a lot of people are struggling with. And like you said, it's not just for people in the military, people who have endured severe trauma have
And not
it,
all,
and they try to
not all,
self-medicate it with drugs and alcohol.
yeah, not all trauma is an event where you almost died either. Like
Okay.
actually, Amy and I kind of run a trauma support peer support group now.
Yeah.
So
Well, I definitely want to talk about that and everything else you're doing because I know that you're very much involved in helping people and I love your heart. So how did you go from like this person who was just kind of full of rage, came against God, came against Christians? You kind of were on a path of just self-destruction. You mentioned that you wanted to die. You had this horrific car accident. You've got PTSD. You're not able to function. Where does God come into the picture? And then how has that affected your life today?
well, God came in about, it was supposed to be a 13-week or 14-week program for my therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up lasting way longer than that. But about halfway through, I kept getting too scared to go to that. So I'd stay home, sit at home, and drink the rest of the alcohol I had here, and then walk to the store and get more. When I was on my way home from the store, one of those times doing that, I almost got ran over by a rumpy truck, a garbage truck, and it just it rattled me totally. And like
Mm-hmm.
something came to me on my way home, like this if I want to get better, there's only two ways to do this therapy program. And that's all the way or not at all.
Mm-hmm.
May as well go all the way because
Right.
the best thing that can happen is, or the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work and I can kill myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
I said that to myself. Best thing that happens is it worked.
Yeah.
I gave it my all and it worked.
Wow.
And then I finally decided that I was told by my doctor. So I took a diagnostic test every time I went to him. I was told by him, like I took one and I noticed that I was doing better. And like he comes in smiling and just shaking his head. And I'm like, uh-oh, uh-oh. And he was like, if you would have came in your first appointment with these test scores, I could not have diagnosed you with PTSD. If that's not cured, I don't know what is.
Wow.
I had
That's
every
incredible.
I had every intention of leaving the doctor that day and going and getting a bottle of vodka and drinking it.
Mhm.
Instead, I came straight home, sat on my couch, and was just sitting here. And it's like God said to me, "Do you see now what I've been trying to show you all along?"
Amen.
And
Amen.
that date was March 14th or 15th of 2018. I had not drank in a couple days just because my therapist started telling me to not drink for a day before I came there.
Mhm.
And I've been sober ever since then. March 13th, 2018, I've been sober since. And
Amen.
from that
Praise God.
point, I took that same attitude towards my recovery, that there's only two ways to do this: all the way or not at all.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I started helping people, and like old friends, even my first ex-wife, we were really good friends still. She always told me that my purpose in life is to help people.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I was at a camp out for my home group, and there was a speaker that was talking about had brothers that died in car wrecks, and
Mhm.
it just hit me. Like, I know why I survived my wreck now, so I
Mhm.
can help people going through this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I now say that I'm grateful that I have PTSD and grateful that I am an alcoholic, because I have found the help for both, and I can help others. And we started a trauma support group after me trying for a couple years to find a way to do it.
Mhm.
The way just kind of landed in our lap. We
Mhm.
took over something from somebody and we just changed it. And it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, there was a day when I was walking towards the bus from work, and there's a guy walking down the street, and he clearly seemed to be struggling with chemicals of some type. And he has to use my phone. I let him, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not gonna run. I'm not gonna run." I was like, "I'm not worried." And he hung up, and I looked at him, and I was like, "Can I ask you a question? And you can be totally honest with me. I won't judge you. Are you on anything?" And he said something, and I was like, "Well, I've been in recovery for like 3.5 years now. I just want to let you know that you don't have to live that way anymore." And like, seeing his eyes light up, and like, there's people that I talk to that I'll just spread the lessons I've learned.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes out of the Bible, a lot of it comes from my therapy, a lot of it comes from AA. All of that comes from God.
Mm.
Like, any single way I can help glorify God by showing his children that he is the answer and he will save them, because he does want to.
I love it. I love that, Craig. And I love that you were just able to minister to that person right there, right on the street, right where he was at. And it sounded like he received that from you just by his reaction. You're such a calm, pleasant guy. You just seem to be so at peace. And I know that that's because you carry the Prince of Peace with you. But I can't imagine when you talk about your old life, like I can't imagine that's you. And when I talk to Amy and when I listen to her story, and I can't imagine that she went through those things. And that's really what God does. He brings transformation. I don't look like anything like the old me. You don't look like the old you. Amy doesn't look like the old her, right? And on it goes. And that transformation is available to everybody. And that's what Jesus does. When he comes into our lives, we don't have to fix ourselves up before we meet him, but he comes in and he starts to clean house. And he does that because he loves us so much. And I really like what you said earlier about there are two ways to do something, all the way or none at all. And I feel like a lot of people go to different programs, maybe different rehabs, and they say, oh, that didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. Is it because it didn't work or because we don't work? We don't make the effort. We do things halfway. We don't really try. And then we blame them like, well, they didn't fix me. But when you really say, I'm ready and I am going to apply myself to this, God gets in there and does amazing transformation. So I absolutely love what you're doing, and I could just talk to you forever, but we need to end. But I want to give you one more opportunity to share. Is there something that you would like to say that you haven't had a chance to say yet? Or would you like to speak to that person who's really in a stuck place like you once were?
I just it there's a couple things. Um,
Sure.
the people out there that are calling on God and not seeing Him answer. Think about it this way: if your house catches fire and you call 911, as soon as you call and tell them the house is on fire, are you going to hang up or are you going to stay on the line to tell them where to come? If
Mm,
you've called on God and you don't think He's answered yet, stay on the line. He will.
mm,
He
mm.
God doesn't love us because of who we are or what we've done. God loves us because of who He is and what He's done. And
Oh,
there's just it. If there was anyone that was undeserving of God's love, it was me.
mm,
And that's why, again, like I told you, Paul really sticks out to me. He was stricken blind, and then he became one of the biggest apostles of the word. It. I was a pagan that hated Christians, and I was almost killed to be saved. It. It just. And you never know where that answer from God's going to come from. It's not always a booming voice, and there's rarely burning bushes anymore. But God does speak still.
He
And
certainly does. He certainly does. Amen to that, Craig. And, if you want to hear God's voice, you just open up the Bible and start
yep,
reading, and he will speak to you. That's so awesome. Well, again, I love what God has done in your life, and he wastes nothing. And you've had an incredible life, and yet look at you, you're getting married here soon, and you and Amy are a fierce team of people who know God and who have been transformed by his love. So I just, I can't wait to hear more amazing God stories from both of you, because you're both incredible people. And I just love the way that you love each other, and that you love God and you love people.
yes, we
Awesome.
do.
All right. Well, thank you for being our guest today, Craig.
Thanks for
God
having
bless
me.
you. And we'll definitely want to stay in touch, because I love your story and it's not done yet. And I want to thank our audience for watching this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go on their journey with God. If you're new here, give us a like or follow, and please share this message out, because I know there's somebody that you know who needs to hear what Craig had to say today. So God bless you, Craig, and we'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.
Bye.